Hello students, welcome once again to this course on gender sensitization. Today I am going to speak to you on the topic of trafficking of women and children. Now today trafficking has emerged as one of the most important issue in the agenda of violence against women. In fact, this is the third largest revenue earner in the world today. Most of the revenues come from arms trade and drug, but the difference is that when you are caught in an arms trade or a drugs trade, it is you who are put behind bar. But what happens in the case of trafficking? It is the women who is being trafficked is put behind bar, but the person who is responsible for this trafficking is nowhere in the scene. So it has really emerged as a major issue, and it involves both gender and a basic human rights abuse. There are various truths when you look at the issue of trafficking. There are, the estimates vary because the whole nature of this trade is such that you cannot really pinpoint and tell the exact numbers, but more than 8 million women across the world are in trafficking, and about 25% of them are children. Not only that, but at the age at which the children are getting trafficked, young girls, this is also day by day declining. It was the women's movement which and lot of women's group who first drew attention to the issue of trafficking and the exploitation of women, and from 1990s onwards it became recognized as an organized enterprise, and there were various NGO groups who went into the scene, started investigating the issue. The media also exposed it, this whole issue of exploitation, and there was a lot of public awareness that was created. The UNO also stepped into this issue with a large number of initiatives, though right from 1903 to 1949 the UNO has been talking about trafficking, and it was declared that trafficking was something which was incompatible with the dignity and worth of a human person, because what you are doing under this is you are selling the women for benefit of another person. By 1996 there were 71 countries that had signed this convention talking against trafficking, but somehow this was an issue which could not really be controlled, and there are various laws which came up at the international front, and there was a international protocol on trafficking in 2000. One of the major reasons for trafficking is poverty, underdevelopment, and the lack of equal opportunities. How we look upon a woman, how we treat women, that is something which is very important. Now there is a lot of confusion, and I am sure you also have this confusion. Many people use the word prostitution and trafficking as similar terms, but there is a major difference. See, in the case of prostitution, both are gender violence, I do agree, but in the case of prostitution, definitely there is some amount of say, though you cannot say that 100%, but in the case of trafficking, a woman is brought into trafficking primarily by deceit, by a false promise. Many a times they are promised a better life, they are all looking to improve their condition, they are offered employment or they are offered marriage, and these gullible young women get into the trap and then they are sold for sex slavery or other things. So what happens in trafficking is that though both are areas where women are using their bodies, but at least in the case of prostitution, Many feminists say that it can be voluntary, though again there is a lot of debate on this issue, that how can prostitution be voluntary. The women gets into prostitution because of a socioeconomic coercions, compulsions, but definitely in the case of trafficking, deceit is something which is very important. And feminists around the world have kept, you looked at this issue in different terms. Some, say that it is something which you cannot, you have to protect it, because it is also like prostitution, it is like sex work, and these women have to be trafficked. When I published my book on sex trafficking in South Asia, something which became very evident to me in the case studies that I did, there are 10 people who live off the earnings of these women. There is a spotter who comes to the village, and it would generally be a woman. She would be an old aunt whom this girl is very familiar with, the family is very familiar with. So there would be a spotter, then there would be a recruiter, there would be a buyer, there would be a seller, there would be a transporter, there would be a harborer, there would be a financier, brothel keeper, pimp, and finally this girl reaches a client. So, there are 10 people who are earning and living off these women, and they are exploited very badly, because what happens, this girl, once she enters into trafficking, she just becomes a powerless, helpless, choiceless, she is already debt bonded, she is threatened to get into the area, and they are enslaved for their life. Many a times to make them enter prostitution or trafficking, they are already raped, abused and exploited. So, this girl is someone who has no choices to make. She is put into that. But now when you talk of the issue of trafficking, it is very difficult to really analyze. Like I told you in the beginning, how many women are there in trafficking. These are again numbers which are very difficult to speak about, because trafficking is just the end of a long chain. I've already told you how many people survive out of the living of this girl who is into sex work, and we have to really three aspects have to be focused when we are studying trafficking. One is called the transit, destination, and the whole supply chain. See, this girl comes from a certain point, she is sent to a certain point, and there is a whole supply chain of all these people who are down the line and earning out of her. The girl trafficked, there is always a focus on this girl because she is the one who is easily visible. What I found in my study was, nowadays with the use of smartphones, with internet technology, it has become so easy. You can easily send the photos of these girls, and the person who is doing this is totally behind the scenes, and the whole trade is carried on. And there are lot of people who work as contract laborers, they are part-time operators who are involved in this. And then if you look at regions like Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, we have already had some traditional forms of prostitutions. You look at Jogins, you look at Matarammas, Domaras, and the Basavis. They were already into prostitution, and transferring them into sex, work in trafficking becomes something which is very easy. Now, there are various issues when we look at the different dimensions of trafficking. There are various socioeconomic issues in this exploitation, because most of these victims do not know that they are going for sex work. They are always brought on a false pretext. Maybe they are trying to better their career prospect, they are promised better jobs. In my all study of in Telangana, from these villages, they are brought to Hyderabad. From Hyderabad, they are then sent to Delhi, Bombay and Goa. but they were always promised in the village. The person met the parents of this girl saying that, I will get her a better job and she will earn so much, she will send money to you. And once, the parents agree and this girl is brought and put into trafficking, the person disappears from the scene. Secondly, poverty, deprivation and the secondary status which we accord to women in society, the whole prejudice against a girl child. Today the family structures are weakening, and all this become responsible for pushing these girls into trafficking. Even today, when you look at it, our public morality has changed, our attitude towards sex, morality, with a, increase in media views, look at urbanization, migration, and today consumerism has increased so much, So, all this has resulted in a change in the public morality. And especially in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, where we did our study, most of these girls came from drought prone areas. See, they were already very poor, they were trying to improve their life status. There is a very close connection between globalization and trafficking. Globalization has today diminished the means of livelihood, especially for the poor. Large tracts of agricultural lands have now been converted by commercial organization into aqua production. See, earlier these people could survive on their land, but now many of them, because of privatization, they have given. And besides this, many countries, because of globalization, they have used this whole strategy for survival and development. They, if you look at countries like Thailand, they advertise them as destination for tourists, and they encourage a lot of entertainment industries. And whether we talk in terms of massage parlors, whether we talk in terms of tourism, entertainment industry, they all depend on sex work, and therefore all these girls are easily brought into trafficking. Again, many of these girls come from, like I said already, poor families. They are illiterate. They have no other means of improving their livelihood. The educational opportunities to them are very limited, and therefore they have no sex development, and sex work is the only work which they feel they can do. Now, when I look at the world today, you can see a lot of, the whole world is interconnected with trafficking. They are, each country is connected. You have in Nepal, if you look at it, you will have women coming from, Nepal to India, Bangladesh to India, from China, they are moving into Middle East. So, from less developed to more developed countries, you have a lot of trafficking. Now, let me talk a little about the laws related to trafficking. If we look at the Constitution of India, you have Article 23(1), which prohibits the trafficking of human beings and forced labor. Then you also have the Immoral Trafficking Prevention Act of 1956, which again, talks about prostitution and preventing trafficking. And you also have the Indian Penal Code, where there are so many sections under section 361, which talks of kidnapping from lawful guardianship, section 362 on abduction, section 366 on procurement of minor girls, section 366B on importation of girls from foreign countries, and section 372 selling minors for the purpose of prostitution. I can go on and on, there are so many provisions. But there is a lot of difference between what is the law and what happens in reality. The conviction rate is very low in India. In fact, there are a large number of NGOs who are working on this issue, but they also lack any kind of authority. They have very meager funds to deal with this issue. So, trafficking is more or less a socio-economic issue, and the major issues in this are rehabilitation and reintegration. Once you get these girls, how do you rehabilitate them back into life? How do you integrate them into society. And it is very important that we have to intervene and bring about change in this issue. Today, child trafficking is also becoming very rampant. In fact, you will be surprised to know that young girls as young as 7 years to 9 years are also brought into trafficking. There is a very widely held belief that having sex with the children who are virgins, then it can cure sexually transmitted disease. I don't know how this myth came about, but that becomes a reason for many young children to be brought into trafficking. Now, what happens as a result of this? One, many of these men pass on their aids to these girls, and the whole perception of this child becomes very sexualized, and it also kind of engenders the abuser in the child, because as they grow up, many of these girls who are into trafficking, we found that when they grow up, they themselves become brothel madams, and they bring in a lot of victims to them. The girl that is trafficked, I think I have made it very clear that one, they come from very poor background, they are very poor, but what is very important in this is there is a lot of deception, force and coercion which is involved. These are three key words when we talk of trafficking: deception, force and coercion. Many of these girls suffer from debt bondage, and they want to try to improve their lot, and they get into it. And what happens? There is a systematic abuse of these girls before they are pushed into sex work. See, many a time they are forced to drink alcohol because they have to serve about 30 to 40 clients a day, because the more clients they serve, the more profit the madam would get, and they try to recover the money which they have spent in buying this girl. So, they are used to drugs, many of them are used to drug, they are abused with drinking. And so, when they are caught, because we have visited a large number of homes where these girls are kept, it is not that easy to reform them. First they have to be de-addicted from the drugs, and they become so addicted to their drinking, and there are a lot of withdrawal symptoms which one can see. Many of these girls become very abusive, they are very aggressive, and then many a times the family does not want to do anything with them. We ourselves looked at many case studies where the family said, we have already declared in our village that this girl died, she had gone to look for a job in the city, she met with an accident, and we don't want them. See, because the honor of that family becomes very important, and the family is not willing to take them back. So, there are so many issues with regard to trafficking, and our police is also really not equipped. The criminal justice system, the law enforcement agencies are really not equipped to deal with such an organized crime like trafficking. It is something which is, it becomes a transnational crime. And it is so organized. Each country is governed by its own law. So, how do you deal with issues of transnational organized crime? And there is, a kind of, from neighboring countries, a lot of trafficking takes place where they are trying to improve their lot. And therefore, it is very important, when you look at India, you have 4 pathways, something called the Bombay network, Goa network, Calcutta network and Delhi network, where these girls are brought into trafficking. And earlier, it was something, trafficking and AIDS also has a very close connection. Now, how do we deal with these issues? First, we have to recognize that securing the state accountability for violation of fundamental human rights is an essential element. We have to build in an awareness, creating more and more awareness. We have to even, the punishment should be severe, and the offenders should be checked. There has to be a preventive strategy, so that we cannot just cure the end result. There has to be a preventive strategy with which we can deal. And there would be 3 layers of this approach. First is primary prevention, where you can target the whole community, create awareness, talk about these young girls. There could be a secondary prevention, where there could be programs on addressing certain specific sections of population, and then there could also be a tertiary prevention, where we are talking in terms of interventions. And therefore I would like to say that we use the symbol of blue, wear blue day. This encourages the public wearing blue, so that they become aware of the issue of trafficking, and this is something which is very important. And therefore we must recognize that trafficking is a very serious issue. It is a source of profit to a large number of people, but it is a global phenomena. The source country is always an underdeveloped country from where these girls are sent, and it is a violation of human rights. There has to be a human rights approach to the whole issue. We have to really look at the role of the family, the community in this, and only then will we be able to address this issue. Thank you very much.